dear students. This is your first lecture in the course English 3 and I am your instructor Shazia Riaz Dar for this course. In this course, we are going to look at briefly at types of communication, what is the business communication and why it is necessary for you people, and what are the communication barriers and what are the presentation skills, some techniques about your CV or resume writing, and this course will also provide you some materials about how to do job interviews successfully and what kind of steps you could take in order to accomplish with your CVs and other technical requirements when you are applying for your jobs after getting the degree. So our today's lecture, which is lecture 1, is about overview and some types of communication. This lecture is going to provide you some general overview about the communication and how many types we could study under this major heading. Why we need to communicate? So first of all, we'll see the objective of communication, why we need any language to communicate. So the objective of every communication is to have people understand what we are trying to convey. You know, in our daily lives, we need to communicate with other people in order to convey our thoughts, feelings towards them, or in order to do some important tasks related to our jobs and education. So this is why communication is quite necessary in our daily lives. And in language itself, the spoken language is primary language and the written language is secondary language. There are thousands of languages in the world. Many of them are spoken and many of them are written. Some of them are only spoken but not written. But there is no language in the world that is only written but not spoken. So this quote from a renowned author shows that communication is that much necessary that we cannot survive unless until we communicate with other people, with other nations, and uh, so on. So if we see the proper definition of communication, so by communication we mean a process by which information is transmitted between individuals and organizations so that an understanding response results. Another definition of communication is the process which involves transmission and accurate replication of ideas ensured by feedback for the purpose of eliciting actions which will accomplish organizational goals. So by these definitions you see this is the communication is a two-way process. In communication process you not only say something but you also need to receive some response on that what you are saying. You need some feedback uh, on your communication. For example, if you are going to apply for a job, so your CV is a communication with the target or with the target organization, and their response, whether their acknowledgement of submission of that CV or their call for interview is a response which or the feedback for your submission of CV. So this shows that communication is a two-way process. You need two persons, two organizations, and more than two people in this process. Why communication is important for an individual? So first of all, the first and foremost important thing in communication process is that it helps in getting a desired job. Getting a desired job is not an easy task. It requires a person to be excellent, especially in terms of communication abilities. So what are communication abilities? So they are, or they can be classified into 5 categories, that is reading, writing, speaking, listening and observing. Observing is added recently, but there are four basic pillars in communication process, that and they are reading, writing, speaking, and listening. If your four skills are good, then get you would be successful in getting your desired job. If a candidate is a good reader of not only textbooks but reference books or some other relevant material books, but also of newspapers, magazines, this would help him developing confidence level at the time of interview. In addition, the reading of magazines, articles, and editorials would increase in your vocabulary regarding your uh, regarding your language, most preferably English language in this case. The second advantage you would get by communicating is it helps in maintaining social relationships. Human beings are social animals, right, and they live in communities, and for this reason they need to talk to other people, they need to establish their relationships with other people. So we as human beings live in a cobweb of relationships rather than social relationship. So these social relationships compel us to act simultaneously in the capacity of father or mother, child, husband or wife, uncle or auntie, neighbors, cousins, teachers, nephews, and so on. So, all these relationships, especially near ones, could be maintained properly if we can communicate well to all these relations. That we are here to take care of them, and our services are always there to help them in case of any needs. So this is the reason that by communicating with all these relationships, you may be able to maintain them in a good way. The third important thing which you would do by communication or by adhering to communication process, that is, it helps in getting on the job promotion. First of all, it helps you to get your desired job, but the people who are already in the job, they will get benefits from communication process in order to get some promotions or other incentives from your job employees. For example, perhaps finding a job would not be a big deal in case of if the candidate is well connected and belongs to a well-off family. But promotion on the job requires some extra skills on the part of the candidate. And what are those some extra skills? See, you have applied for a job and you got that, but you need to polish your image now because the company has given you the job, your desired job, and now you have to prove your abilities in order to get further incentives in remaining in that job. And also some people need confirmation of that job after the probation period of 3 or 4 months, maybe 6 months, right? So for this reason you need some extra skills on the part of candidates in order to convince the hiring authorities to take you for a longer time and to promote you or to give you other incentives. So, among those skills, communication abilities rank on the top. If a person can speak well during interactive and presentation sessions, can reports properly, he will automatically be in the eyes of the management, and whenever a chance for promotion comes, he will be on the top of the list. And you have seen such examples in your daily life. If you have seen some jobians around you, that the people who are doing jobs, they need to communicate with their bosses in a well manner, plus they need to participate in the interactive sessions or some leading sessions at your job place. Or sometimes the person who is using, apparently it seems that he or she is using some cheesy language for reporting to his boss, his or her boss, but this is the way to inspire the management and get a chance for promotion. The next thing which the communication process helps in solving others' problems. Sometimes you need to communicate with other people in solving their problems. Unless you communicate with other people, you cannot get the idea why he or she is worried about. So it is commonly observed that around us there are so many people whom we like to meet. Their company is a source of enrichment for us. When we are with them, we feel secured. The only reason for such types of feelings is that such type of people are not only good listeners. Yeah, this is very important pillar in the communication process. You need to be a good listener in order to build and maintain your social relationships. But they also know it well that whenever they would speak, it would only be for the sake of encouraging, not discouraging or criticizing other people, only for solving others' problems and not for creating problems for others. Such people are no doubt excellent communicators, and they are preferred everywhere because they had a good listening ability for other people's problems. There are certain types of communication. You see, communication is a process, and we have certain types of it based on some broader categories. We have hundreds of types, but they are derived from some broader categories, and these broader categories are verbal communication, non-verbal communication, and visual communication. So these are three broader categories of communication. So first of all, the verbal communication. This involves the use of language and words for the purpose of passing on the intended message. So basically, verbal, as its name shows, involves the words, vocabulary, use of language in order to convey your message, in order to communicate with other people. In general terms, verbal communication means communication in the form of spoken words only. So, verbal communication is related only with your oral communication, or we may say spoken type of activities. But in the context of types of communication, verbal communication can be in the spoken or in the written form. Sometimes you communicate verbally in the written form as well, but it is more related with the spoken type of communication. Thus, the verbal form may be oral or written as discussed in the next slide. Verbal communication is basically divided into two subcategories, which are we discuss in the next slide. So the first type of verbal communication is written communication. This kind of communication involves any kind of exchange of information in the written form. For example, the emails, you sometimes communicate through emails, and this is an example of verbal communication. Sometimes you communicate through text messages, WhatsApp messages. Sometimes you communicate through texts, through letters, reports. As you know, the multinational companies nowadays publish their annual reports on their websites in order to communicate with the target audience or clients, in order to share their achievements with the target audience and the clients through their reports. Other than this, you see, nowadays people at individual level or at organizational level, they share their posts regarding to something new in their life or in their organization, some new achievement, some new addition on social media platforms. Similarly, they share some kind of documents related to their achievements and new editions. Then there are handbooks, which is also a type of verbal communication in written form. And then there are posters and flyers. In this modern era, with the advancement of technology, the use of posters and flyers have been seen very commonly. You might see these flyers and posters at every road, in every street nowadays, which are communicating at verbal level with the target audience, which are which are performing the purpose of attracting the audience for the organization who has posted these posters and flyers on the streets or the walls of any roads. Then there is the second type of verbal communication, which is oral communication. And in this type of verbal communication, we usually employs the spoken word, either direct or indirect, as a communication channel. So this is basically through spoken channel, and this verbal communication could be made on a channel that causes information in only one form, and that is sound. So this is the communication through sound. When you speak to other people, you could converse either face to face, as you know happen in dialogues in face to face meetings, or over the phone. Sometimes you communicate with other people over the phone, sometimes through Skype meetings or voice notes or chat rooms, etc. Conferences are held nowadays through chat rooms and through Skype meetings. It all comes under the oral communication. This form of communication is an effective form because there are rare chances of misunderstanding with the target audience, and you could convey your message accurately or authentically. The second type of communication after verbal communication is non-verbal communication. So in this type of communication, messages are relayed without the transmission of words. There are no words, there is no spoken channel in this type of communication. The messages here are wordless messages. This form of communication mainly aids verbal communication. It supplements it with gestures, body language, symbols, and expressions. Sometimes you see when a candidate comes for an interview, so his or her body language determines sometimes that he's nervous or he is confused, or maybe he's lacking some information which is being asked from him or her. Through these, one may communicate one's mood. So you can judge the mood of another person by observing or by judging his or her body language, uh, certain expressions or gestures, and you can judge the opinion, or you will show a reaction to the messages that are relaying. One's non-verbal action often sets the tone for the dialogue. You can control and guide the communication if you control and guide the non-verbal communication. So some of the modes of non-verbal communication are discussed in the next slide. Physical non-verbal communication is the first subcategory of non-verbal communication. So this is the sum total of the physically observable. In this type of non-verbal communication, we usually observe hand gestures, body language, facial expressions. You see sometimes nervous people kept on playing with their hands. So you can judge from the movement of their hands that they are, say, facing some kind of issues. The tone of one's voice, if it is shrieking, if it is normal, the rhyme, the pitch of your voice, the posture, stance, touch, gaze, and other things determine your gesture. And all these are the parts of nonverbal communication. Several researchers have revealed that physical nonverbal communication constitutes about 55% of our daily communication. So this is the part of 55% in our daily. There are subtle signals that are picked up as part of our biological writing. For example, if you rest your head on your palms, it will mean that you are very disappointed or angry. So this is a research. And in a similar way, other subtle hints will convey your reaction to the presenter or your audience reaction to you. The next type of non-verbal communication is paralanguage. This is the art of reading between the lines. The main kind of such communication is done with the tone of one's voice, This kind of communication amounts to almost 38% of all the communication that we do every day. So this parts over overall communication of the whole day, and the 38% share goes to paralanguage, along with the tone of the voice, the style of speaking, how the person is speaking, voice quality. Stress, by stress doesn't mean anxiety, by stress how the stress on the words is being used by the person, and the emotions attached with that language or the spoken words or intonation serves the purpose of communication. And these aspects are not verbal, they are paralinguistic features of non-verbal communication. The third type of non-verbal communication is aesthetic communication. Art is an important means of communication. Through the paintings or other forms of art, an artist can convey the strongest messages. You see, sometimes the painters paint what they can never say. Several times in the history of the world, art has been used as an effective form of non-verbal communication. The next type of non-verbal communication is your appearance. Sometimes your appearance, other than your body language, is also communicating your image to the bosses, to the other people, to the organizations, and so on. The first impression sets the tone. People will react to your appearance, and this is a fact of life. Your clothes, the color of the fabric you are using, even the color of fabric and the design of fabric determines your personality. So all determine the reaction of your audience. That's why it is commonly said that your first appearance matters a lot. The third type of communication is visual communication. So the first type was verbal communication, the second was non-verbal, and the third is visual communication. This is related to the transmission of information and ideas using symbols and imagery. We use some kind of symbols and imageries in order to communicate with other people. It is one of three main types of communication along with verbal communication, that is related to speaking and the writing, and non-verbal communication that is related to paralinguistic features such as tone, body language, intonation, etc. Visual communication is believed to be the type that people rely on most, and it includes signs, graphic designs, films, typography, and countless other examples. There is an example of this. Imagine that you are on a vacation in a foreign city and you get lost while driving. If you were at home, you could stop and ask someone for directions. But here, you don't speak the language very well, so asking directions won't do much good. Instead, you can rely on a map using landmarks, routes, and familiar signs which successfully lead you back to your hotel. So in this scenario, you have found your way back almost entirely through visual communication. This is communication through visual aids like drawings, play cards, presentations, and illustrations, and the signboards on the roads. Even you see sometimes there are signs which obviously do not speak, but by watching them, by their visual image, you can get the message. And similarly, it happens with the signboards of outside the toilets everywhere, whether in hotels, whether in public places, that determine that this toilet is for female side and this toilet is for male sides. So all these examples are included in visual communication. So Facebook is also a type of visual communication with memes, videos, images, etc. Instagram is an image only platform, and advisors use imagery to sell products and ideas. Apart from the above types which we have mentioned, which are verbal, non-verbal, and visual, there are two other types which are formal and informal type of communication. So formal communication is of following types: vertical The information or data flows up and down the organizational structure. Horizontal, this is the communication between two similar levels of the organization. And diagonal, this is the communication across the functional level of employees from various departments of the organization. And informal communication is a type of communication in which we involved in our daily routines and with with the common people around us, with our parents, friends, and other social relationships. This is called informal communication. So this is all for today's lecture. Thank you so much for being attentive.